Producing any garden at Chelsea is always an adventure, and you never quite know where it's going to take you. But to produce the Arthritis Research UK garden for an organisation that does so much good and affects so many people, and with a personal connection as well, is just magical, really. Planning a garden at Chelsea Flower Show, it's a long, long process. It starts about a year before you even enter site. And of course, when you're dealing with a client that has such an important message to portray, it's absolutely key that that message is what drives every decision that you make. One of the things that I particularly enjoy about creating a garden is that there's a real sense of exploration, that almost I learn as much about the subject as other people will learn about the plants that we then use to portray that subject. And the Arthritis Research UK garden is no different. When I was 12, 13, I started to get stiff joints. I was running for the county, I was involved in all sorts of activities. And then in my mid-teens, I came home from playing football one afternoon and had a slightly stiff foot. And my foot ballooned, and the conclusion was that I had a form of arthritis. And all my teens, pretty much, were, my overriding memory of my teenage years is of being in pain.
Sanguisulva setsagoon. I think it was only discovered a couple of years ago in outer Mongolia, and it grows like the burnets that you expect to see in July.
Yeah.
So Arnhem and Red Thunder, but it does flower in May. So great hopes that we'll have it'll be the first time someone will see that in flower at Chelsea.
Oh, it'd be fantastic if it did, and it just fits perfectly with the colours that we're playing with and what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
So yes, if we can get it to work. The first section of the garden is at the end of the garden. It's enshrouded in woodland. There's a glass cube with sofas and seating area within it. There are views, but they're concealed views. We refer to it as the veiled garden. It came out of the fact that anyone who was living with arthritis described the feeling as if the world was starting to close in on them. And I can certainly relate to that, because when I was really in the sort of midst of trying to deal with arthritis, that's exactly how I felt. It was just absolute frustration at times. The middle section of the garden is found from the veiled section via a somewhat tortuous stepping stone path. You literally have to tread your way between the understory. And the idea is that those stones are slightly uneven, so there's no uniformity in it. And it's very reminiscent of those first steps that you take towards finding a solution to your particular form of arthritis. The lucid section of the garden is dominated by plants which transfer some of the muted tones from the first section, but there's a bit more energy about them. There's still a woodland canopy there. There's still hazels, but the hazels have been coppiced, the stems become straighter, the canopies are lifted, so there are views which become afforded. There's a certain sort of clarity and simplicity to that section of the garden. Instead of recoiling from the effects of arthritis, it's suddenly about that sense that actually I can do something about this. I'm not going to be beaten by this. When's the corylus coming in from Germany?
This is Law Road.
So these will go into what sort of size?
They will go into air pots, and the main thing is a tree this size, with the root ball. They've been transplanted every year for 4 years to keep all the fibre in the root ball, but you just need to be able to give it that buffer of moisture, because hazel will dry out quite quickly.
The third section of the garden, which is the area of the garden that I think most people will come to first, which sounds slightly odd, but there's a very deliberate reason for it, because what I wanted to do is to take most people who perhaps aren't aware of the effects of arthritis backwards in time. And so the third section of the garden is called the Radiant Garden. And it's an area which is completely surrounded by low box hedges, just to around about chest height. There's a security that is inevitable about being contained within something. It's not towering overhead, so it's not daunting. It's just a sense of belonging within that space. And the planting on either side is radiant in its colour palette. There are some real exotics in there, intense colours, orange from Arthritis Research UK's logo, but also balancing that with the darker ink blues and purples. It's given you that opportunity to say, actually, this is what life is about. It's about this kaleidoscope of experiences and colours. And that's how I want to live. This is the piece of the garden that I want to be in. I think the most important thing is that it's not a garden which demonstrates how you live with arthritis. It's taking a completely different view. It's about the emotional response to arthritis. But ultimately, I think that funding by donations is essential. And if people don't support charities like Arthritis Research UK in that funding, then my journey would certainly have been very different. And millions of people within the UK's journey with arthritis would have undoubtedly been very different.